Welcome to Emotional Savvy, the Relationship Help Show. I'm Dr. Roberta Shaler. If you're ready to increase your confidence in conversations and conflict, deepen your self-awareness, expand your connectedness, and enrich your relationship with yourself and other humans you care about, and even those you wish you didn't, you're in the right place. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, so glad you joined us again and joined me again. And in this case, us, because my guest is Stephani Roberts. We're going to be talking about some very interesting pieces about how life intervenes, why it pushed her to do a podcast while being a digital content strategist in the background, or on the day she does her podcast, at least in the background.
Right.
So if you're just joining us for the first time, so glad you're here, because there's so much to learn, to be connect with, to understand you're not isolated or marginalized or anything when you have a problem. And many times if you're dealing with the difficult people I talk about, and you'll know about this, Stephani, that those people make it their life's work to make you feel isolated and marginalized and wrong. So having this podcast and having guests who know things about this, whether or not you're in a relationship with those people I call hijackals, maybe it's just a difficult relationship or a difficult time for your relationship. So we want to be talking about that today. And if you enjoy this podcast, do leave a review for that, or tell your friends who might need to know, because you want to be a resource for them too. Don't keep it a secret. Move on over there. So let me tell you a little bit about Stephani. She's an avid lifelong learner and a spiritual seeker. She's a podcast host. She has a great podcast. I've been her guest. It was my pleasure to do that. And she shines the spotlight on women freeing themselves from emotional abuse and finding a way to heal and thrive on their own terms. Sounds good, right? She's a digital content strategist who works with experts, coaches, and spiritual healers to amplify their authority online via podcast guesting and strategic repurposing of content. So she says that you can jump off the content hamster wheel and make your content work for you by standing out from the noise. And we know that that works because we make it work for ourselves, don't we, Stephani?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's good. So I'm going to jump in on the podcast piece, because that's the piece that's going to help us talk about relationships the fastest.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. First, thank you. It's good to be here.
Oh, well, you're so welcome. Tell us why you decided to have a podcast that helps people free themselves from emotional abuse. What, of all the things you could have chosen to podcast on, made you choose that?
Yeah, well, I was in a situation myself where I just felt so stuck, and I had tried so many things. I was in therapy, I had books, I had audiobooks, I chose journals, I did all kinds of self-help myself, and I was like, this is not getting better. It was just getting worse. And then things kind of came to a head for me during a period where I had listened to podcasts for many years, but I started listening to John Lee Dumas, who is like the king of podcasting. And he was one of the first people to have a daily podcast. And so I was getting used to, between driving into work, I worked at MIT, so I had like a 30-minute ride in and out, and I would put in my earbuds and listen to audiobooks that filled me up, or podcasts or whatever. And it just felt like such a great kind of personal way to, I guess, almost privately, like directly pour positive information into my brain. So when I was coming out of my very toxic situation, which was not pretty at all, I said, I want to do that. I want to do this for other people. And my background was media. I have a degree in film. I worked in public television and in academia. I did a lot with like web development and that kind of stuff. And so for me, it was not going to be super challenging. So that was my dream, to put something out there to help other people. And what happened was, actually when I moved to a new town and I started talking to other people about my situation, and I didn't even mention the podcast, it just more and more people were saying, that's my story. That's my sister's story. oh, I work with a woman like that. Oh, my sister-in-law or my mom, and I was like, wow, this is crazy how prevalent this was. I had no idea. I really, truly didn't. And I had enough books about it toward the end that I knew that I wasn't the only one, but I had no idea. I kept calling it the silent epidemic.
Well, it is the silent epidemic. So that's a good thing to talk about because of this marginalization and this isolation. Because when you're with a difficult person, and I call them hijackals so that we're not trying to diagnose anybody, but they're just generally difficult, toxic, hard to get along with, fault-finding, crazy-making people. And their whole game is to cull you from the herd and have them be the authority on your reality. Right. And so, in fact, it is a silent epidemic because when you go out to tell somebody, maybe your best friend who knows you as a couple, or somebody in the office, or someone at church, or someone in the community, you go out to tell them about your relationship, and you're really kind of afraid to do it, but you really need to tell somebody. Right. And hijackals paint a public picture of perfection. So you go and tell them and they go, oh, I can't see that. Are you sure it's not your problem?
Right.
And then you get that rewounding, like, oh, I'm not even safe to tell somebody who knows him or her, because there's an equal number of hijackals who are male or female. So how long did it take you from recognizing that silent epidemic that you were suffering from to actually move along and say, no, not going to have this anymore?
Yeah. Well, I think that I was aware of it pretty early on. We were together for about 8 years. I have to say I had a similar relationship before that, which I thought I healed from and was like totally cured, and I had my eyes wide open. It could never happen again. And I gave multiple people a book that I had called In Sheep's Clothing,
right?
Which is a really good book, but not good enough to cure me.
Yeah, well, let me say something about that, just while you bring it up, Stephanie, so we don't lose it.
Sure.
Reading books is for recognition and realization, not for healing.
Exactly.
So it's not a surprise that, you felt you were informed and your eyes were open, and that's a great first step. But for anybody listening who's just started to realize that maybe it's not me that's the problem in this relationship, and you go out, maybe look for that book In Sheep's Clothing, or any of the other myriad books that are out there, and you go, oh my goodness, or my book. I've got 3 books about hijackals. You can go find those. You can get my free ebook, for heaven's sake. It's called How to Spot a Hijackal. Just go to hijackals.com. So, the information is available, but to be able to then know what to do after the crisis is over, after you have finished, after you have made the decision or need to make the decision to leave, then when you finally get into a safe space, and then you've still got all of the stuff that hijackals like to do, the going to court, the arguing over children, the withholding of money, all the things. Right. Then the healing begins. The rest of it is awareness. Right. And getting a little empowered because, oh my, maybe it's not my fault. If it's not my fault, how do I have to reconstruct my own thinking? So you got to that place where you did some reading and you realized, okay, I'm aware now, but I didn't heal because I got another one.
Yeah. And so I was with that one and I saw red flags, and I was in a really vulnerable place. I had a mother who died of cancer around the same time that I met him. I just, there was a lot going on, and I was of a certain age, hadn't had children yet. And in my mind, I was like, I'm okay with never having kids. I'm going to move to San Francisco, do my life. And he just swooped right in and altered those plans kind of, and, said everything he thought I wanted to hear. And I think what woke me up was, one of the things was we were retelling how we met. And I said, oh, we really connected at this first conversation. And he was laughing. And, all the other people that I had met through Match.com had long emails, and then they were weird at coffee dates. And he was the first one that I met and actually had a drink with him. And he was like, yeah, I couldn't hear you at all. So like he literally wasn't even hearing my words, but knew how to go, yeah, oh well, ha ha ha, And there was some other guy when I walked to the bathroom apparently was like, she's hot, And so it was like an attaboy scenario where he wasn't even really connecting to me. And I didn't even find that out till years later, but it kind of made everything make sense that there was this like false persona happening and there were
Sure.
red flags along the way. But when I was with him, we had, children, a house, the whole deal. I just tried so hard to not be responsible for the universe. I was responsible for the recession. I was responsible for everything that went wrong. I mean,
The
I'm not joking.
IRS, taxes,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
weather. Yeah.
Everything that went wrong was me. And I started to self-isolate. And
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to be around anybody. I didn't want to, and my friends were not really part of the picture. And I think they wondered what happened to me. But every time I'd make plans, they were sabotaged.
Sure. Yes.
And yeah.
Well, you're really talking about many of the hallmarks of hijackals, because what do they love more than ultimate control? If they can control the fact that they say, yes, we can go to that party, and 10 minutes beforehand, you're not going anymore, they're happy. They never
Right.
intended to go in the first place. This is just a way of control and not making plans and things. And so they do, after a while, you may self-isolate, as you said, but on the other hand, they've been doing a really good job of culling you from the herd and
Oh,
saying,
for sure.
well, I don't much like that friend of yours, and why do you go talk to that one? And I don't think there's any need to see your mother anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, certainly your mother had passed with the second one, and you were in a vulnerable state. So
Right.
what a perfect thing. You got the straggling behind last sheep, feeling a little sad and wounded.
Right.
Woo! Let me
Yeah.
grab
No,
that
exactly.
one.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm laughing, but it's shadow laughter. I mean, because these things that happen, these ways that hijackals behave, are so identifiable from way over here. But
Right.
when you're with them,
Classic.
you're just really trying to make it work. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they love good people. They love good people who will be compassionate,
Exactly.
forgive them, the
Forgiving.
benefit of the doubt. They'll forgive them. They'll start fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And, I made a video the other day, Stephanie, on love bombing, which is how a hijackal keeps you hooked on hope that the person you
Right.
fell in love with is the real person.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so good people want to believe that that person that they met, that they fell in love with, is that person. And as they start to have kind of little holes in the armor here, and then they start shifting, and then they start caring less, and then they start blaming, and some of them do it gently. I've had people who have had quite decent relationships for up to 4 years before the wheels fell off,
Interesting. Huh.
because they were getting so much from the relationship, right?
Right.
But as soon as the children came,
Okay.
then there's a problem,
Catalyst. Yeah.
right?
Competition. Yeah.
Because yes, the competition, exactly. Now your time is divided, your attention is
Mm-hmm.
divided, and then there's a horrible thing that happened, and maybe it happened in your relationship, which is they like to have a child, first of all, because it gives them control over you. Now I've
Mm-hmm.
got another tie to you,
Right.
but and it's not that they're not interested in children. They are,
Right.
but they see them differently. As they see you differently, they see you as supply to give them what they
Of
need.
course. Yes.
And so they see children that way. So here's the issue. I'm kind of interested to see if it
Yeah.
happened to you with your girls, which is that they get to a place where they're getting all kinds of, turning my phone off, getting all kinds of good feedback from people. Oh, your baby's so sweet. Oh, isn't that wonderful? And they're just happy as anything because they're getting all this attention, but they're getting increasingly separate from you because that thing that came into the life has interrupted their flow of supply.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then the real crux is when the child gets to 18 to 24 months, their brain development is at a place that the child finally realizes that my mommy and I are not the same person, and I
Mm-hmm.
can separate. This is the first level of individuation that we have. And then they learn those magical words, no.
Exactly. Yeah.
At that moment, the hijackal gets a little crazy.
Yeah.
Because they've lost your full-time attention, and now that child is not just raining all their smiles and I'll do anything you want to make you happy so you'll feed me on them. And the
Right.
child is now saying no. Did that happen?
With one of my children, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, yeah, she was the like the black sheep at age, not even 2. she was the outcast and kind of, cast aside. And there was a golden child scenario going on. It's classic. And I mean, I saw it without even reading about it and would explain. And then I would go and find out, this is classic. But I thought it was just, wasn't surprised to find there was a pattern. But yeah, and that discarding of the cute little baby and making her this like evil child, and even calling her, I'm trying to remember, it was like wolf child, or it was just this like, you're a wolf child. And I had to talk to both my kids about that. And my older daughter, who's 5 years older, like, when you call her that, you're calling yourself a wolf. Were you raised by wolves? And anybody who's calling her that, like meaning her dad, that means he's a wolf, right? And I was trying to make a joke out of it, but to like say, like, we can't say things that are, that are mean-spirited. And it just gets really tricky, Roberta. Like, that's the thing. Like, you struggle, like, I really don't, even on this podcast, I don't want to I don't want him to be the bad guy all the time. So then I look like the bad guy, right? So what I try to do is just be the best mom that I can be, and acknowledge when these weird things come up like that. There are many of them, right? Yes. But it is a tricky thing that I never really thought about when I left. And I think our life got way more complicated when I left. And that's not to say you shouldn't leave, but it's like, take your time, plan ahead, get support, get a therapist, get people around you, including, therapist, coach, attorneys who understand this personality type. So there aren't like
hard to
tons
find
of little surprises along the way. I had 3 lawyers.
You have to, and that, because even though when I work with someone and they're in the question, what's going on, that may be the question, or maybe I've figured out what's going on now, what to do. And if they decide to leave, I say, unless there's sexual or physical abuse, let's give ourselves a lot of time to plan this thing. Don't tell the hijackal you're leaving. Do your own work, become empowered, learn all the things that could happen, learn how to interview an attorney to find out whether or not, they really understand this, because attorneys like clients. So they will say almost anything to get one.
Yeah.
And so they'll say, well, have you dealt with difficult people before, or narcissistic people before? Oh, yes. But no, they haven't. Then they go to court and they're silent. They go, well, they've got their money and they're out of there. And that's not all attorneys by any stretch, but it's really important to know how to get an attorney, because you said you had 3.
Yeah. Well, and one tip about that, even if you go to, I think it's Avo or one of these attorney like review sites, there's a little pie chart at the bottom, and it shows how much of their experience is in what percentage. If it isn't 100% family law, you definitely don't want that person. I mean, you don't want somebody who's also doing real estate, finance, whatever. And I mean, not to say that every family lawyer is the best choice, but that's at least getting you closer to some form of understanding. Yeah.
Well, it's true. And then when you interview that 100% family, then you find out, which arenas are you working in? Because family law has a lot of pieces.
Right.
And so then being able to know this little fact that I hope everybody really, really believes me when I say this, a hijackal will fire attorneys until they get a hijackal attorney. And so they want one that's just like them. So you're going to face 2 of them in court. And if you go in with an attorney who's like, what hit me? You are in a poor position. And so very important to know how to find these attorneys. So that's good advice. First of all, make sure that they're 100% family law. And
Yeah,
then I would add, interview them to find out what's their track record on
exactly.
custody
Exactly.
and assets and dealing with difficult people who come in and lie and manipulate and exploit and seduce the court.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we go to court, that's a snapshot for the court. They never see the video of your life.
Exactly.
They just see what was presented on that day, in that time frame, in that frame of mind that the judge has. And whatever went down is where the decision is made.
Right.
So you have to be really super prepared in a very specific way for that. And I really take your point. Like, so much work happens once you find, like, I am in a new situation. I got here consciously. I did it all right. But now you can't really be prepared for being brand new in the world.
Right.
Like,
It's a
now
whole
you're
new
there
set.
with 2 children. You've
Uh,
got, the resources have been shared. Things are
right.
ongoing. You're never completely free of a hijackal because they love to go back to court. You have
Right.
the children tying you to them, so you have to communicate in some way.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to play their games. All they want is power over. I do a lot of graphics, Stephanie, and I have this graphic that says hijackals don't really have love to give you. They have uses for you.
Mm.
And I think it's important to remember that. I don't mean to tar them as completely
Right.
black and white. I'm
Right.
just saying that they're more interested in what they can get from you and what you will give them and what they can take from you than they are interested in the well-being of the child, the well-being of the ongoing co-parenting relationship.
Right.
So that's their tendency. That's their natural tendency. They've been taught this very carefully. Most people who fall in the hijackal territory actually had those traits developed before 24 months old.
Yeah. Their
So
situation.
it's
For
not
sure.
like you're going to go back and change them. They're
I
not.
know, but Roberta, they're with people like me. We're like so empathic and
Right.
loving, and we want to believe they could be loved out of it. And so if you're listening to this going, oh, she's so cold, like that's not him, which is what we would be thinking, given what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they just were constructed in this family context and they know what they know, and it's like it really is like being part of a pack or a tribe, and you are all of that stuff is kind of given to you so young and you don't
Yeah.
question it, and it's all you know.
No.
So anything outside of that, even if it's this oozing with love person, you don't trust that loving person. You trust what you know because you think you're going to get who knows what, right? Who knows what they grew up with. And that was the most disturbing thing to me, was that
Yeah.
this was the first time I couldn't love someone through something and get them to trust me. My love was the thing they didn't trust, that he didn't trust. That was hard.
It is very, very hard. Yeah. I mean, when you're giving to someone and they can't receive, or they won't receive, they have no
It's
receptors
confusing.
for it. And they believe that the only way they're safe in the world is to have power over someone else. They're the ones who call the shots. They're the ones who make the decisions.
Right.
That's very sad. But when people are born into a family where there's a hijackal parent, there is going to be that 50% chance that in order to keep that parent happy, they had to jump all these hoops and be this way. So there's a 50% chance they're going to model themselves after that parent. And the other 50%, and of course all areas in between, but the other 50% is that you're going to be what I call hijackal bait.
Right.
You're going to be formed in a way that you are so good at keeping hijackals happy
Yeah.
that it feels comfortably uncomfortable to you, which is why you so wisely did so much work before you made the decision to leave, because that's the best time. You don't want to go leaving unless there's, physical or sexual abuse, but you don't want to go leaving and then be sitting somewhere disempowered, no money, no anything, and you're feeling like, oh, what have I done? And
Right.
you're just in a horrible mess. You may become depressed. You may
For
have
sure.
lost too much. You don't know how you're going to
Mhm.
get it back. Much better to prepare, be the healthiest you possibly can, the most empowered, learn some skills for dealing with them while in the relationship. Never, ever, ever, I'll say it again, broadcast that you're leaving.
Right.
That just causes more problems than you ever want to deal with, and tightening of a whole lot of negativity. So we don't want that. But
Mhm.
so important. So you got out of this situation. You found yourself in a whole new set of issues. That's what you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, so I don't want to diminish. So when I left, I literally said to people, because I left for like a week and was staying with a friend. I say I escaped, I fled, whatever. I had not been that mentally relaxed for about 8 years,
Wow.
and I actually slept my first full night's sleep. It was like sleeping with the enemy. I had so much anxiety, and the cycle of anxiety is you're so exhausted that you want to sleep, but you're so exhausted you can't, and you have brain fog, and it's all the same stuff you experience as a new parent with an infant, waking you multiple times through the night, except it's ongoing, and there's really no respite from that. And I'd see a therapist, which they always tell you, don't see a therapist with somebody like this, and rightly so, because I would see this therapist, and it was always on a Friday, and I would sit there and try to be my best self and listen, and he had her in his pocket, and it would just be so disturbing to me that
Yeah.
I was so low on sleep and full of anxiety. I would be in tears. And when I left, I would get headaches. And so each weekend was like almost like a hangover kind of headache, except didn't have the joy of drinking. And it was an emotionally draining, throbbing headache. So I was a mess. I mean, I just never felt good, And then getting out was what I really wanted to say, was all of that sucked. But getting out and not having the appropriate help,
Yes.
support that I mentioned, especially the correct attorney, that re-abuse in court and in court documents
Yes.
felt far more painful than anything I had been through.
I
Anything.
absolutely know that. I do, because you can't believe you're still being betrayed after
Yeah.
all you've given up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. I want to say something about the therapist situation because I am one, right?
Right.
Um,
This
you
was
have to,
couples therapy. Sorry. We
yeah,
were
but
together.
even that, I have clients all over the world because I work by video conferencing,
Yeah.
and I work with a couple. People will come and someone will have contacted me, and they'll say, I think this is what's going on. And I always invite them, if they're still in the relationship, to
Right.
bring the hijackal with them,
Right.
because my hijackal radar is really good.
Yeah.
And
You're exceptional, though.
but what I'm saying, Stephanie, is
Yeah.
choose, just like the attorney we were talking
Yes.
about, choose a therapist who specializes in this, and preferably
Right.
one who's been through it. You can't do anything. I was talking with a woman yesterday, and we were talking about her very recent sexual abuse,
Mm.
and she was raped. And she said to me, but I went to a therapist, and I've been 3 times, but she's nice and all, but she doesn't really understand. I said, she's never been raped. She's never been
Right.
assaulted. She said, yeah, that's the problem. Well, it's
Right.
the same thing. I have been raped. I understand that. So when I'm talking to her, I know what I'm talking about. I was raised with 2 hijackal parents. So I became hijackal bait on steroids. So I had been there, done that marriage, and had the nasty video and the ragged t-shirt and all of that,
Right.
just
Right.
like you're talking
The
about.
bumper sticker, the whole.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And then I had to figure out all this stuff because I lived in a small town. There was nobody. I tried going to a therapist with him, and this is not going anywhere because of exactly what you said. A hijackal will manipulate the therapist over and seduce them to their way of
Mm-hmm.
thinking and rewound you, who brought them there to get someone else to see what's really going on.
Exactly.
So when I work with couples, just to put this in there because of your experience, I tell my people, I'll see you 3 times before I will really get into any depth. So I have ways of calibrating everything. And then what happens at the 3rd time, or sometimes at the end of the 2nd time, I will ask the hijackal a question to which they will be infuriated. And at that moment, they quit. But because I work in packages, they've already purchased a package of sessions that now is available to the partner.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Brilliant.
So
Oh,
then that person, they have the option of showing up, but
yeah.
they don't want me in their life so much.
Right.
So,
Right.
then we end up in strange places. I've had all kinds of calls, Stephanie, that came from cafes in Saudi Arabia and things where they had to get their get away and be able to talk and things,
Oh
which
my
is why I
goodness.
now have my membership site. But
Right.
back to your story. I mean, now we've pointed out two things that you went through. You were, in a sense, rewounded by therapy, just because the person
For
did
sure.
not understand. You
Yeah.
were wounded by the first attorney or
Mhm.
two, or two,
Right, right.
because they didn't
Just
understand.
the whole process. Yeah.
And then
Of course.
at the same time, you're trying to be mommy and confident and yay, girls, we can do this, and
Right.
hold the show together. It's really hard. So
Yeah.
big high five to you,
Oh,
because you
thanks.
got through it and you have succeeded so beautifully and you're moving in great directions. So I think it's really important for people to hear about your podcast, and I'd love them to hear that
Thanks.
from you. Tell them about it.
Yeah, so it's the Audacious Life podcast, and it's theaudaciouslife.com. You can also find us over on iTunes. And yeah, I mean, there was a period where it was kind of on hiatus, but we're up, back and running. And there's also a YouTube channel, which I will be posting a whole bunch of my recent interviews. But there I interview survivors, some anonymous, some totally out.
Mm-hmm.
I also interview therapists, a couple of divorce attorneys, people who are kind of spiritual healers who work on self, and just that whole piece, like, okay, you want to pull yourself out of the victim mode and really focus on, okay, we've called a spade a spade. Now what about me? Instead of focusing on the hijackal, right?
Right.
And then that's really what the show is about. It's like, how can you move yourself from where you were to the most beautiful life that you can imagine, and get yourself to believe that you are worthy of that and that it is possible. And it takes baby steps, because you've been programmed, and
Mm-hmm.
your life around you, everything you know, has probably been stripped away. So you're starting over. So it's really what it's about, starting over, learning to
Yes.
thrive.
And I've listened, and I hope you will too. It's great. Go to theaudaciouslife.com. You'll find it all about it there. There'll be a link to how you can get over to iTunes or wherever you like to get your podcast, because I'm sure you're on many
Yes, many.
many places to get it. So, Stephanie, before we leave and end this, what would you say? What nugget of wisdom, with this distance that you have, would you give to a man or woman who is sitting there in their home listening to this, saying, it sounds so familiar and I feel so trapped?
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
I would say just listen to that inner voice. If this resonates with you, there is a reason. And then the best you can do is tune in to this kind of information and really begin to think about what you want, what you deserve, and take the long path if you want, but really listen to that voice. Don't sweep it under the carpet. Don't dismiss those true feelings, because you deserve more. Absolutely.
Well said. You do deserve more. You deserve to be happy and healthy, have a sense of well-being, to feel competent, to feel comfortable, and to feel confident. And that's a birthright. You have the right to take up space and draw breath and say what you think, feel, need, or want, as long as you don't mention any other human or pronoun. There are so many things that you have the right to do. Don't let one person's need to have control over you to become the reason that you get up in the morning. As soon as you realize that my life is being limited by this, a relationship should support you to have more wonder, more joy, more emotional intimacy. That person who has your back, who walks by your side, that should all be there. If it is not there, work on it. If it is unavailable to you, find out. So important. So always remember, strong people get help.
Right. Totally. Yes.
So important. So thank you, Stephani.
Thank you.
My guest today has been Stephani Roberts. She's a very, very well versed person in the digital content world, but she's been through the experience of having a hijackal, a difficult person, a toxic person, that much as you might love them, you have to recognize that they're unhealthy to be around often, and they're not interested in changing. So thank you for sharing your story with us. You can find Stephani at theaudaciouslife.com. I hope you'll visit that. I hope you'll listen to her podcast. And you want to find me at FOR relationshiphelp.com, or my YouTube channel, For Relationship Help. Big surprise. And over there, I have a weekly live stream show, 6 o'clock on Monday evening Pacific time. Come, ask your questions, participate, be part of that. Get even more than you can. There's always new content. And Stephani, as a digital content strategist, would tell you, yeah, that's a good thing, right?
Yes, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, well,
Awesome.
We're all doing a good job of getting the word out there to help other people as a result of our experience. So thanks for listening. I look forward to talking with you in the next episode, and I hope you'll come and bring a few friends too. Take good care. I'm so glad you spent this time with me today. I hope you heard something that touched your heart and empowered you to move forward. You can have the life and relationships that you most want, and that begins with you, within you, today. I'm always here for you. Life can get better, and you heard that from me, the Relationship Help Doctor. I'm Roberta Shaler, and I work with clients throughout the world through video conferencing. We can talk. So learn more at forrelationshiphelp.com, forrelationshiphelp.com, or visit me on YouTube at For Relationship Help. Join me for next week's show.